Welcome to episode 13 of Paperboy Adventures. It's going to be a fun one today as we welcome Danny Zig to the pod. Danny is the CEO and co-founder of the premium rum brand Coconut Cartel. Danny, welcome.
Kyle, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat rum today.
Absolutely. Very cool story behind the brand and love what you're doing over there. But before we really get going, could you just fill us in, give us an elevator pitch at a high level? What are you doing over there at Coconut Cartel?
You kind of took my pitch a little bit, but no. So Coconut Cartel. We're a premium rum brand. But we're not just a premium rum brand. We do some really innovative stuff in our proofing process or in the way that we make our rum. Um, involve natural and agricultural products from around the region where we make our rum. So we like to say we're sort of infusing the terroir into our rums, which kind of give it a unique flavor profile, and it's something that we're the only ones doing it. So excited to tell you more about it and tell your listeners more about it because it's interesting and tasty and very different in the rum world. We're not following the rules per se, so
Yeah.
that's what
Well,
we break rules. We're a rule breaking premium rum brand.
I like it. The rum world needs to be a little bit shaken up. So there hasn't been too much. I'm an outsider. I don't drink a lot of rum, but I haven't seen much action in terms of new brands that are coming into the space. So I think you make a compelling case as far as the timing in the category. But yeah, we'll get to the production and everything that you're doing from the product standpoint in a little bit here. But before we get to that, the current status, how did you get into this? I understand this has been happening, is going on for close to 10 years, or 2012 I saw was when you first got going down this path. So take us to then. What happened then, and how did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, we've had a really interesting and fun story. It didn't all start out in rum, but back in 2012, it actually started out in the coconut water wars that were going on at the time. So you had Vita Coco and Zico going at it in a Tetra Pak product here in the US. And so my brother and I, we grew up in Central America between El Salvador and Guatemala. And our mom is originally Guatemalan, so Latin background through and through, but we were born in Miami and then moved back down to Central America when we were really young. So I was about 9 years old. And when coconut water started popping off here, we really wanted to like tasting coconut water out of a fresh coconut is the way that we grew up drinking it. It doesn't compare to drinking out of a Tetra Pak, right? As you can imagine, it's not processed, heat pasteurized or anything, so it's really fresh and super tasty. So we wanted to share with people first the coconut water that we grew up drinking. And so my brother quite literally stuffed his suitcase with about 200 little coconuts. We take the husk off of them, and they're about the size of a softball. So he brought two suitcases full of these coconuts and pretty much smuggled them into Miami. And that's where our name comes from. It's like the beginning days we were smuggling coconuts through the airport, and like Border Patrol was like at first like, what the hell is this? And then 2 to 3 trips in, they already knew my brother by name, and it was cool. But we did that a few times, and that's where we got our name from. We were coconut smugglers. And then we were.
Wait, I gotta stop you there. So you were smuggling coconuts from, was it Guatemala into?
So this was actually El Salvador at the time.
El
So we grew
Salvador.
up between
Okay.
both places, so we operate in both. But yeah, this was at the time El Salvador exclusively.
So I guess my question is why, and you can answer that whatever direction you want. But are there coconuts available to source in Florida and the U.S., or does everything come from Central or South America?
So the U.S. coconut trade or agricultural industry got hit with a plague, I want to say in the 70s, called lethal yellowing. So in Florida and even in like Hawaii, if there was any coconut farming going on, they got hit with this plague, which essentially makes the coconuts like not be uniform, meaning that some will have water, some won't, some will be sour, some will be sweet. So you couldn't make an industry of it, unfortunately. And it's illegal to bring in a full coconut with the husk on it because it's a seed, and they don't want you planting farms of this right now, I guess. So no, when we started off, it was a hole in the market where we were actually, if you came to Miami and you went to the air and you flew into the airport, there was this giant billboard that said "It's so Miami." It was a campaign the government put up, and there was a girl drinking out of a green coconut, which was kind of misleading because you'd go to the tourists would come to the pools and ask for a coconut. They want fresh coconut water, and there are no coconuts to be had. So when we rolled around with a coconut not from here, we sort of solved a huge issue for them where, you couldn't find fresh coconuts. If you go to like the farmers market here in Miami, you'll see people selling fresh coconut water of a coconut. These are guys that are going around and like harvesting coconuts from people's private like houses. So to answer your question, no, there really isn't a coconut industry here for fresh
Yeah,
coconut water, and that's why we're importing, and then they started importing after us from Thailand.
got it. Okay, so really, it was an availability and sounds like quality thing where you're getting
Mhm.
just better quality product down there. Okay, sorry to cut you off. You hit me with coconut smuggling, so I had to ask a question. Uh, you smuggled the coconuts. You were working on coconut water. Bring us up to where you're at now or after that.
Yeah, so we did that for about 5 years, and we really cut our teeth in that time. My brother and I, and Lena, who's still with us, is our national sales director. We cut our teeth in on-premise sales and like hospitality, because you would assume that you're selling like a grocery item if you're bringing in a fresh coconut that you'd be selling to Whole Foods and going down the health food route, but actually we were selling to hospitality venues. This was poolside, beachside drinking, so we were engaging with beverage directors and bar managers and food and beverage directors of the hotel world, right? So we learned how to work with them, created relationships. And in doing so, we started working sort of alongside the spirits industry because when we'd come in with a fresh coconut, one of the first questions that you'd get from these beverage directors was, hey, what cocktail can I make in this coconut? Because once one goes out on the pool deck, someone sees it, they're like, I want one of those. And quite frankly, us being from Latin America and genuinely drinking rum as our go-to, we were just like, put a shot of like Zacapa rum in it, which is from Guatemala, or Flor de Caña, like whatever we grew up around, which was like typically aged, like dark aged rums. We would tell them just put a shot of it in there and make it just like a really easy boozy drink. And they did that, and it was really, really popular. So much so that we were activating with these like rum brands would hire us to activate at like events. So like if it was a music festival coming into town, we'd get dollars from them to set up whatever marketing activation we wanted, as long as we were pouring whatever rum that they had. So in doing that, we now are like, okay, we're marketing rum, dark rum, and what we noticed was that these brands, these like legacy or like old school but like really high end rum brands, they're typically advertising or trying to target an older demographic, more traditional, like white tablecloth, cigar, older gentlemen. Like that was really the vibe and continues to be so. But we were advertising them to a much younger generation. You're talking about like music festivals in Miami, or at that time, this was back in 2015, 16 or so. Millennials, like we were the young ones in town. So we were advertising to millennials. We were at the cool hotels on Miami Beach. Like it was a completely different demo that they weren't targeting directly. So they were finding a way to target them via our brand, right? So in doing that, we sort of discovered that there is um, a lot of upside in the millennial gen for rum. They were seeing at the same time tequila transform into what it's become today, right? It used to be like, if you think about 10 years ago, tequila was late night shots with salt and lime. Like it wasn't a lifestyle spirit the way that it is today. That started transforming in 2015, 2016. You started seeing that change happen. Um, so when we would present this generation a dark rum, by way of our brand and our little coconut water thing, and I would see it in their eyes that they're like, oh wow, like I didn't know that I like rum. Like, oh, that's good. Like that's not the stuff I'm used to. It's not what I drank in college. Like they're thinking, like people think that like Malibu's rum. So that
Yeah,
sort of
I
segued
think
us.
that's a fair point. And in my generation, a lot of people in their mid to late 30s, won't give away my exact age, but I'll say had that experience at college, right? And had a probably a bad experience with a low quality rum, and that was like the last
That's the last. Or
of
like, I
rum.
will never ever again. Um,
Right.
but yeah, we
Yeah.
spent like 5 years of like, I guess you could call it market research, where this was like kind of happening right in front of us. Where we're like, man, like they like it if you present it to them in a different way, and they try a real good rum. Maybe we can do the same thing that tequila has done for rum. So
Right.
that was the initial sort of like, okay, the market research happening. And then in about 2017 or so is when we met our today distillery partners, and we started talking about like, okay, how do we combine like our access. So over the years that we were doing just the coconut business, we basically reactivated an entire coconut trade, an entire industry in Central America that was pretty dormant before. They weren't really exporting; they were just selling to people on the side of the roads, right? To like the little coconut stands. So we had access to tens of thousands of acres of coconut farmland. So we're like, how do we combine this natural resource that we're obviously obsessed with, and this distillery's phenomenal aged rum portfolio, to create something that could sort of change the way we think about rum. And so it was then that we started formulating and figuring it out. And in 2019 is when I had the first bottle in my backpack and hit the road again and started tasting people and getting out on the streets to see if we had something viable. So that's
Wow. So, and just so the timeline, you started working on the first product, which was the coconut water product in 2012, 13 ish. Did that for about 5 years, 6 years. And then the first was it Coconut Cartel when you were selling it
it
was.
was.
Okay. So you carried the brand name through.
That's how we
And then,
built the brand, right? So this was like at a
yeah,
time when Instagram was popping off and selfies were popping off. And we were the only people importing fresh coconuts with like we would engrave onto them. So a detail is like, now you see kind of everywhere, even in New York, you see these coconuts with like a brand on them. That was a weird little invention that we came up with back then. And since we were the only people doing it, every single coconut said Coconut Cartel on it. Then we sort of pivoted over and went straight booze because competitors started coming into the space, and they were offering the hotels and anyone their own logo on the coconut. So it became a promo item. You can know it was no longer a brandable experience. So like the investment and everything that you need to make to build a brand wasn't there in a fresh perishable good that, now I could put Fountain Blue on the coconut instead of Coconut
yeah.
Cartel. So that's when we started shifting over to a complete pivot for the spirit.
That must have been a pretty tough decision to make of, you have your history in coconut water and then to switch over to the spirit side of things. Was there like something that really clicked in your mind, or how did you end up making that call?
Look, Sunday, imagine this. Sunday morning, you're laying in bed and you hear the rain outside, right? What does a normal person think? You're like, cozy. I'm gonna like
Stay in bed.
stay in bed and cuddle up. When I would hear rain on a Sunday morning, my heart would drop because that meant that my coconuts were not selling on the pool decks. And I knew that Monday morning I was going to get a phone call from beverage director saying, "Hey, that order that I have coming in on today, tomorrow, cancel it because I still have the inventory you delivered last week. I didn't sell anything." And so the bigger that business got, the scarier it got because it's a perishable good. It goes bad really fast. So if I'm not selling through, you could lose an entire container the next day. So we already like started thinking, okay, we need to figure out a way to scale this in a way that's like it's not lighting money on fire or like rotting money. And our brain was already, we're looking at, pasteurized coconut or bottled coconut waters and things like that. So it was a progression, and then it just kind of clicked, like the spirit part of it sort of clicked, and was partially seeing what was going on in the market, partially like serendipitously meeting world renowned rum makers that were like, hey, yeah, we'd love to work with you. Like it just all lined up. So it wasn't in one moment, but I'll tell you, it was really stressful. The coconut thing was just stressful. And I'm like, we can't scale this. Not to mention that people were reaching out to us from like other states and other countries. They're like, we want them here, we want them here. And I just had to say no because I can't get a perishable good to like Spain.
Yeah,
So
and
we
it's
knew. We knew the brand was sticky. That's when we knew. Or like the name Coconut Cartel, like people remembered. Sort of like we need to scale the name.
it's a great brand name, and I think your story there kind of you're basically summing up the whole conundrum of the food industry. The fresher the product, the harder it is to scale it. Probably the better it is for people, the more you need to localize it. But as you start to look at some of these products, there's no other way. Like some of these categories are really, really tough, and fresh coconut juice, I'm sure is one of those. So makes a ton of sense. And now bringing us up to current day. So you first launched, or bottle number one was 2019. So you've been operating really for the past 6 years, 5, 6 years under this brand. Talk to us about what's changed from when you first started to where you are today.
Yeah, it's been such a interesting experience for us because, we launched it in 2019 and in that time the mantra was you build your brand on premise, right? Like a booze brand, you're told the experts in the field tell you go and you build it on premise, right? And so that's what we did, very small, right? 2019 was literally my brother and I and Lena and a backpack and a bottle. And we didn't even have distribution at the time. So we were just selling through Park Street, which is like a importer with a distributor license, not to get into the semantics. But anyways, we were just small timing 2019, trying to see if there was a product market fit, who likes this, going to our buyers, like really just figuring it out and seeing if our hunch was anything to write home about. And then 2020 rolls around and bing,
On
pandemic
premise
hit.
shuts. Yep.
Yeah,
No more
on-premise
restaurants, no more
shuts
bars.
down,
Yep.
and we're like, "Oh my God, we had just raised a little bit of money to go launch some distribution, some like legitimate distribution and really start pushing the brand after we saw that like there was a fit." And on-premise was dead, and we're like, "What the hell are we gonna do?" So we had this fresh capital, and we had set up an e-commerce solution for ourselves, which in booze is really uncommon, right? Like we're highly regulated. Like every state has distributor stuff going on. But there were some solutions that were coming up that were compliant, and I could offer customers my product in a way that for the customers a complete brand journey. Like if you go on my site, like you didn't even know it was going through a retailer and all the back end stuff. To you, you're like buying from me. So we had that set up. Luckily, you had it set up, and so we just turned it on. We turned that on, and we started all the monies that we had raised. Well, not all of it, but a good chunk of the monies that we had raised, instead of spending it on people on the streets or on premise activations or anything like that we couldn't. We started putting it into meta ads, or at the time, Facebook and Instagram ads, and that went crazy. Like that opened our doors to 40 different states, and we started selling to people everywhere and talking to them. I think the biggest thing about it was being able to talk to customers, right? And again, our DTC people that are listening, you're like, duh, that's why we all do it. But in booze, we couldn't do this. This was like new and novel. So it was really exciting and it was fun. So we did that for about a year, just like exclusively e-commerce. And then with that data, we were able to go to like distributors and say, hey, look, like there's people that are buying here, there. We have interest in these markets. And we went and started. 2021 is really the year that we launched legitimate distribution. And so I call 2020, 2019 and 2020 really just like almost like learning years, like kind of just like a pre-launch, like like let's see if there's something here, because the real business in liquor is distribution, is traditional distribution and building your network within the distributor pipeline to scale. And so that really started in 2021. So I kind of think like our business sort of started over in 2021. So we've been doing that now. I guess it'll be 3-4 years that we've been in legitimate distribution. So we opened up 7 states in 21, and then today we're available in 18 states. We're doing export. We have 6 export markets right now. So we sell to Canada, and we have a couple countries in Europe, and we have a few countries in Europe coming live next year that we're really excited about. But we focus mostly on like 5 regions. So like Florida's big for us, Texas, the Mid-Atlantic is really interesting. So Maryland and DC, and then obviously the Northeast. So we've been kind of really focused on the East Coast and Texas, but it's available in other states by because of a partnership we have with Total Wine. So
Hmm. Yep.
widely distributed, but really focused in on just a few areas where we do most of our volume.
Sure. So super resourceful. You basically, when COVID hit, you went to e-commerce, built up an audience there, and then you leveraged that to get into distributors and expand your reach that way. Uh, and as you know, 2021, so that's when distribution first expanded, 7 states. Now you're 18 states. Has your What's your mentality around on-premise versus off-premise, like route to market? Driving trial, of course, is got to be key for what you're thinking about being this sort of revolution, new age rum brand. So how do you kind of grapple with those two things?
Yeah, for sure. Liquid to lips is key for us, right? So, people trying the product is like the biggest converter for us. So, we launched this brand sort of backwards in a way. So we went e-commerce, and then on premise took a while to just come back in general, right? Florida was going since maybe forever. But like New York and the other territories were just dead shut for a while. So naturally, we started selling in retail in Florida. Like we just really started scaling with retail in Florida. And Florida's a big chain market. So like you have huge chain stores here that you don't have like in New York. New York is all independent stores. Here, you turn on Total Wine, ABC, Publix, Walgreens, Winn-Dixie, like you turn on
You're
hundreds of
catching the
stores at a
market.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were operating in that at first, and so I would say that 22 and 23 we went from e-commerce almost 100% to almost 100% off premise. And we would support it, and our goal the entire time that we're doing this, because retail is, you have to protect it. You have to be like, you have to grow it. You have to build relationships with the retailer. So it was a lot of tastings and demos and like, buy a bottle of cartel, here's a mixture that goes with it, like things like that. So really just focus in on retail for a very long time, which proved to be really successful for us, because with the same amount of budget that I've been operating since 2022, 23, and 24 for retail, I've expanded from less than 200 chain stores to over 800 stores. So like we'll build an area, a chain store, we'll do what we need to do. It'll start moving, it starts getting organic pull, we move to the next pod, boop, 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 boop. And so now we're like in Florida and Texas, a really strong chain brand. Now the on-premise came into play. We knew we had to do on-premise, and we worked sort of hands off as much as we could on premise in certain markets, but it wasn't really until the beginning of this year, so 2024, that we hired our own brand representatives in key markets. And that has been game changer. Wherever we put a body, um, our market is up in the on-premise 100 to 250%. And not only that, it's like the education that goes into educating the industry. So all the bartenders on what the product is, it proliferates, and we couldn't really do that with our off-premise strategy. And then also like our national sales director, like there's just so many people she can talk to, and like distributor. So once we started putting these bodies in, the on-premise started building out, and now I would say our split is like 60-40 off-premise to on-premise. So we're kind of, it's cool because like we have this big pie of business that we've been building in the off-premise, and now like adding the on top of it, although it's like backwards from the way it's traditionally has gone. It's nice because we have this base, and now we're just like adding the icing and adding the like actual marketing component of it, to the point that I'm like, all right, if I have a bunch of menu places in a certain city and people see the brand and they see the product, they can go to any liquor store around them and they will find Coconut Cartel. I don't have to go the other way, or that now I have to convince the store to bring it in. Like it feeds itself. And so it's been a backwards experience, but I think it's working in our favor.
Yeah, and you make a great point on having reps in those key markets and that being critical to turning it on. And just thinking about the product, the differentiation that you have in the production process. you wouldn't know that just by looking at the bottle. So there is that education that needs to be brought to, like you said, I think bartenders are probably, they might be the most important because trial is going to be driven by on premise. But this is actually a perfect kind of segue into the product, and would love to hear you outline, basically the production process, the differences in Coconut Cartel rum against the status quo, because I don't think people are really familiar with, how that comes together, and then where the coconut water comes into play.
Yeah, happy to run you through it. So for the listeners, we have two products. We have our aged rum, which is our first SKU, that I launched in 2019. And then we recently came out with our Blanco this year, in May of this year. And so starting off with the aged rum, or añejo, basically, any spirit, when it comes off of a still, is at a very high alcohol content, right? You're not drinking it straight off the still. Typically, you have a number on a bottle and it says 40% alcohol by volume. And that means that 40% of this volume of the bottle is alcohol and the other 60% is water. And people, or any brand, you always see that they're trying to innovate on the 40% side, like on the base spirit. There's always like a different mash bill or a type of agave or the type of sugar. That's where innovation is typically spinning, or aged in a different barrel. That's where it's all sat always. We innovated on the other side, which is the other 60% of the bottle. So we basically partnered for the 40% of the bottle, let's say like the base rum. We partnered for Añejo with a distillery in Guatemala that has these beautiful aged rums. Their aging houses are world renowned, and they make very traditional Central American style, which comes from a Spanish style of making rum. And these are the ones I mentioned before. They're typically consumed white tablecloth, cigar, older gentlemen. They're very oaky, caramelly. You get those sort of flavor profiles from it. And then we came in, so we have access to these beautiful añejos, and the coconut water comes in the finishing of the rum. So on that last step before it gets bottled, we'll take it out of the barrels, we'll have it in a tank, and quite literally we've harvested fresh coconut water 48 hours before. And that fresh coconut water is not pasteurized, it's not processed in any way. It comes via cold chain to our distillery, where it goes directly, like straight from the truck, into the tanks where our overproof rum is. And we use that coconut water as our agent to dilute, or proof is the term, to the 40% in the bottle. And what that does is it allows the rum and its characters to remain intact. So any characteristics that you get typically from the style of rum remain intact, meaning the flavors that you get from the aging, the flavors that you get from the type of sugarcane base that you're using. So in the case of our añejo, it's like a light molasses. Those remain intact. The coconut water, by it coming in, it sort of, I say, acts like salt on a chocolate chip cookie, or salting your food. There's natural minerals, there's salinity in the coconut water that when they are mixed into the rum, it acts to brighten the rum's flavors. So all of the flavors that you get from it taste brighter, and then you have the sort of minerality and density of the coconut water rounds out the edges, any sharp edges that you may still have in the spirit, and makes it really smooth. It sort of smoothens it out, and really easy to sip. So here you go. Now you have a full 80 proof spirit that has already kind of been like softened up for you to just enjoy neater on the rocks. And so this little innovation, it's confusing to people, because people obviously are going to say, oh, is it a coconut flavored rum? Or they'll taste it and they'll be like, it doesn't taste coconutty. And it's more about the coconut water than it is about coconut flavor. To think about, like, what does coconut water do for us, as like we drink it, out of a bottle after working out or whatever. Like, taste it. It doesn't taste like candied coconut. It doesn't taste like Malibu. It's mostly like salty water, right? It's like a natural Gatorade in a way. So that was our first SKU, and people just really, the flavor and just the texture of it, the mouthfeel is quite frankly, like incomparable to anything. It's so, so nice. And then we use that same technology, I guess that we did technology, I guess agricultural technology, in our Blanco. So Blanco comes from, I just started discovering a couple years back, more complex white rums. So you're seeing these really interesting rums come out of, there's been rum agricoles that come out of the French islands. You have cachaça coming out of Brazil. And then the thing that really turned my head were these rums coming out of Mexico, called charanda or aguardiente de caña. And they're typically made from sugarcane juice. So our dark rum is made from a light molasses, so that's where you get those caramelly, vanilla-y type flavors. Like if you think of molasses, it's like a sweet honey. This stuff is coming from sugarcane juice. It's fresh pressed and it starts fermenting immediately, right on site. So you get grassier, more herbal, herbaceous notes. It's funkier. So if you think of like kombucha in a way, like that kind of funk, like it's fermented, right? So you have like this funky, fruity flavor profile from it. And I love it. Like to me, that's the best rum you can have for in a daiquiri or something with like citrus or like a tiki cocktail. You want that type of rum because it punches through. But typically these types of rums are pretty hot. Like they are high proof and they like will like burn your chest a little bit. So for most people, it's a little aggressive. So I said, okay, the coconut water has this ability to round out the edges to like really soften any blow. I wonder if it would be able to soften some heat on these types of rums. Um, and so we started experimenting again, and created our white rum, which is a combination of, like I said, sugarcane juice base, has pot and column still rum. So pot still rums tend to bring out more of those funky, fruity notes. Column stills are a little cleaner, a little more benign, just kind of more chill, I guess, would be my way of describing it. We combined those two and then brought the coconut water in to proof it like we did the dark rum. And I call it my entry level funky white rum. I want people to taste this rum and say, oh my God, like that's really different, really tasty. I love that. What is that? And not be afraid of it, right? Because the agricoles and stuff are just a little too aggressive. So I hope that with my white rum, um, we're able to open up people's minds around what to expect from a white rum. Typically, white rums on the market are like basically sugarcane vodka. Like they don't have a lot of character going for them. They're very clean column still rums that like are very benign. So once they taste the complexity in this, it's I hope it like sort of triggers this interest to want to try stuff from all over Latin America, like the ones I mentioned before. Like the Mexican stuff is crazy. Um,
Yeah, sure. You're opening up my world. I'm a rum layman, so like I said,
there's so much into it. It's just
I,
really gotten such a bad rap. There's so much good stuff in it. You've no idea.
yeah, I'd love. We're gonna talk about the category in a second and the other spirits as well. I love how you put the 40/60 innovation piece. I didn't think about that of like the your 40% ABV. There's still the 60% that you have to innovate on. Using coconut water in that way, are you the only one who's doing this in the rum space? Like, and did you created this production method yourself?
Yep, we're the only people that are doing this. There are other brands out there that are like coconut rum brands that like will claim they're using real coconut water or something, which I'm sure they are, but it's not being used in the way that we are, which is not as a flavoring agent. It's just used as, like they just put it in there to like sprinkle it in and say that it's being used in there. But I've been around coconuts for almost more than a decade now, and the supply chain that you need to manage in order to have fresh coconut water is not possible to be doing in like Malibu is made in Canada. Like you do not have anything fresh in there. There are no fresh
Yeah,
coconuts in Canada. This is like I say it's like an agricultural product. Like I'm working on farms and distilleries and we're bringing this fresh coconut water over in a way that like has to be very, very well managed. So yeah, I would say the way that we do it, we're the only people that are doing this.
and
You
you said
can't.
it's within that very short timeline, right? It's like 48 hours is the
Yep.
max, and it's just put right into the product.
Yep. Yep. It's farm to bottle, quite literally.
Farm to bottle. I mean, I don't know if that's in your marketing material, but it should be. But super cool to hear about that. So I also think it's really interesting when you look at the spirits landscape over the past, I don't know, 8, 10 years. You have the tequila renaissance. Whiskeys and bourbons have gone through their own sort of category redefinition, and even gin to some extent has as well. There's been some stuff in RTD that has done really well, and on the spirit side. Why rum? Like what's why the bet on rum? What's your thesis behind rum as a spirits category and where it can go?
So why rum? It genuinely starts because I really do enjoy rum. It's what I grew up. I learned to drink on rum. I grew up in Latin America, and everywhere in Latin America where we're growing sugarcane, from Brazil up to Mexico and the Caribbean islands, we're making rum. And I just noticed that like there was a huge discrepancy between the perception of rum everywhere else in the world and the United States. If you go to, like I said, Latin America, you're coming out of the airport in Guatemala, you have like the most prestigious rum showcases in the world. You go to Europe and premium rum, so rum is perceived as to consume in the same way as whiskey. So neat or on the rocks, a lot of aged expressions. You have rums from all over the Caribbean and Latin America that are there. And these rums have been brought over to Europe since a long time ago, since bad times. Um, so they've been educated on rum in a different way than how they have in the United States. In the US, I learned in this process that rum rums made in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands get a tax incentive from the government. It was a way to stimulate the economy on the islands. And essentially, what that did was fund the brands that were coming out of these islands in their expansion in the United States. And the products that they were putting out were typically not aged. They're just white rums that have been, and they've come out at a very low price point because they have the government subsidies. The price point that they've gone out to the market with is much lower than anywhere else in the world. So the education that happened in this country on compared to everywhere else is that rum is cheap, and that because it's cheap, it's mixed into something. So people's like, what is a daiquiri to the American consumer? It's a frozen strawberry daiquiri on a cruise ship. A classic daiquiri, for those who know, more cocktail world, is very far from that. It's a very delicate and nice, simple cocktail. So that discrepancy there, like the fact that rum, like premium rum, rocks everywhere else to the point that in the UK, premium rum has overtaken whiskey for the last 2 years. Like think about that. Like whiskey in the UK, they're selling more rum. Just means that there's a disconnect in terms of what people in the US think rum is. So that to me is the opportunity, is to come in and sort of shatter that stigma and introduce them to whatever else, what the rest of the world has been doing for decades, centuries now. And hopefully flipping the category from, if you go down the rum aisle right now, it's so dusty and fake flavory and just not cool. Like for me, the genuine want to do this also came from the fact that like you'd go over to friends' houses and people were bringing these cool tequila bottles and cool mezcal bottles. Check this out, whatever. I'm not showing up with a bottle of rum from like my grandparents' cabinet. Like that's what exists. You have like the really cheapy stuff, and then you have the really high end stuff that is for those who know, and it's generally like what's in your parents' bar cart or whatever. And I wasn't going to show up to a party with that, but that's what I drink. So I'm like, there has to be something in the middle here that's like high quality with a modern approach and modern branding for the generation that is being attracted to all these other categories where they've actually done that, where they've, directed their marketing for what the consumer cares about. So
Right. Basically, what I've heard you say, like premiumization has happened across all of these other segments of spirits, and it hasn't yet happened in rum.
it has not.
And the point you make about the U.S. subsidies when it comes to taxes is super interesting. So, like, basically, that resulted in these low price point poor quality products that flooded the market. There, a lot of that still is in the consumer's mind as the only rum that they know. So there's an opportunity here, but it is going to take some time, some education, some great marketing and product experience to get it over the hump. So in your mind, the UK point is I didn't know that as well. So it's in the UK, rum has passed whiskey. Is that
Yep.
that's what you said?
Yep.
Uh, I guess, do you know why that's happening? And then my second part to that question is, how do we make that happen here?
Why it's happening? Well, it's just they've had rum, like premium rums out there for a long time. Like think about it, like they've brought from the Caribbean, like the Caribbeans were British islands, so they were since then they've been bringing over aged rums. So they've been exposed to Jamaican rums, they've been exposed to Barbados rums like forever. Um and so the baseline for them already there is not that rum is the cheap college thing I drank. And so as brands have started developing and putting product to market, it's kind of like tequila. Like they already know what it is. And so all that needed to happen is like some cool brands come in or some just like relevant brands come onto the shelf and they're not afraid of it. They're going to the rum aisle and they're saying, oh, cool new brand. I know the provenance of, let's say, I know Guatemalan rums or I know Cuban rums also. We've had no access to Cuban rums forever. Cuba was exporting to Europe, right? So they just understand it and it's an easy spirit to drink. Like it's easier to drink a dark rum than it is a hardcore whiskey. So the volume comes from that. And how do we do that in the US? You know, there's obviously like the organic way to do it, which is the way that we're doing it, which is a lot of just like liquid to lips and like getting people to taste it, putting it in the places that um are influential. So like the cool cocktail bars and like where you go to see like what's going on. So New York City cool cocktail bar, that's for mezcal also. Mezcal is like a perfect example of a category that took a while to pop off, but it just came off as it's a hard spirit. I mean, mezcal to me is a harsh spirit, and it's gotten so much velocity in the last few years. But it came from educating the bartending scene, who then educates the consumer. So we need to do some of that. But I also think that there is an opportunity, and I toy with it, and I see it, and I'm like, and don't kill me for saying this, but like potentially the right celebrity coming in, the right influential celebrity coming into the space could have a mass education effect. Or if you have someone who's a tastemaker, maybe not even use the word celebrity or influencer, a tastemaker who has a wide audience to say, this is how you drink this rum, then it'll start clicking, like presented in such a way that like you're drinking this neater on the rocks or in a very elevated cocktail, it'll start faster, you know, the education process will be faster. So whether it's us or somebody else, I love brands coming into the space. I love seeing new premium rum brands coming in. I just want them to do a good job so that we all together change the aisle, right? So it's gonna be a collective effort, I think is really the takeaway here is we're gonna need a few of us to lift the boat.
I love the perspective that rising tide will lift all boats in the rum category, and nice rebranding of celebrities to tastemakers. But it's true, like celebrity is a bad word now, but in my opinion, it's people hate it when there's nothing there's no depth to it. It's a vapid partnership because this person has a big following. If you're working with the right person who has a connection to your area, to the product itself, then it's all fair game. I think it's all in the positioning of how you bring that person on. But yeah,
It has
celebrities
to be authentic. It has
has
to
to be
be an
authentic.
authentic connection.
Well put. Uh, awesome. Well, it's been really cool to hear about the story of the brand, and thank you for taking us through it. So it's awesome product. Coconut Cartel. I would not be surprised to see you uh, doing very big things in a very short amount of time. So, really enjoyed this conversation, Danny, and congrats on all the success thus far.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you giving us this platform to share our story and share a view of our PO of our POS room.
Yeah,
Um,
now you can get back to the real work. But
yeah.
yeah, thanks, Danny. Appreciate you joining.
Thanks so much, Kyle. Have a good one.
Bye bye.